Where we talk about sepsis, disability, and chronic illness. For today's episode, we are continuing to recognize September as Sepsis Awareness Month. And I'm going to have a wide variety of people on this month, as well as some additional special episodes. And we're also going to be talking with family members who have lost someone to sepsis. I'd like to welcome Peter Guglietta from Chicago to talk with us today about his wife, Gail. Gail was only 54 years old when she lost her life to a colon perforation from undiagnosed diverticulitis, just like I had. Only Gail didn't make it. She died as a result of the septic shock that had set in, and this was 5 years ago. Since then, Peter has taken up the mantle of advocacy. He's been writing op-eds to appear in his local newspaper. He's been working with his local legislators requesting the Sepsis Awareness Month proclamation from Governor Pritzker each year. He works with gastrointestinal specialists at Northwestern University. He's been doing everything and anything that he can to help raise awareness and carry Gail's light forward. Peter, it's great to see you here again today. Thank you so much for joining us today on the 120 Pod. So for another episode of the 120 Pod, and today I have someone with me who is a member of the community of loss with sepsis. We have sepsis survivors, we have caretakers of people who are still taking care of people who survive sepsis, and then we have the families of loss. And I definitely want to highlight them and highlight their voices on this podcast because we have so much yet to realize and learn about sepsis and their endless efforts, these family members' efforts to advocate and make people aware, even after the most tragic of occurrences in their own families. And today I'm going to welcome Peter Guglietta from Chicago, and he is here to talk about his wife, Gail. Thank you, Peter, for joining me today.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast.
Yes, and I know we've talked before. How long's it been? Like we've known each other now a little over a year?
Oh, year and a half maybe or so. I think the last time I spoke with you was last fall. I think it was
Yes,
October, maybe November, somewhere in that time. Yeah.
talking about advocacy. And when
Yes.
did you lose Gail?
It's been just a little over 5 years now. It was March of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a year before my occurrence, which was May 2021. So
Yeah.
it's been over 5 years for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whew. And I was hoping to start, like if you could just tell us a little bit about Gail. And I know that there are some topics you also very dearly, that are dear to your heart, that you want to cover about Gail and about sepsis and how this all came about for you and your family. Like what happened?
Thanks. Let me just tell you a little bit about Gail, about
Yeah.
how we met and all of that.
Yes.
Um, Gail was, I'm originally from Boston.
Oh.
Gail is Chicago native, Chicago area native.
Mhm.
And we had met when I was working for a printing company in the Boston area, and she had just finished her undergrad studies at Bates College in Maine. She had moved down to Boston. She came to work for the company I was with, and her goal, which she accomplished, was to go to law school. But what she wanted to do was to work for about a year, year and a half, and before she went to law school to get a feel for the working world before she jumped into what would be a 3-year full-time endeavor. Um, so when she came to work there, there's the usual meet and greet with people. And I remember when I met her for the first time, just talking about where we were from and all that. And I said, "Oh, you're from Chicago?" I said, "Well, and I had traveled to Chicago quite often on business." And I said, "I just love the city. It is my favorite city to visit. And we were talking a little bit about that, and asked her about where she grew up and where she was from. And she told me, the suburbs, and had just finished at. She said, I went to a small college in Maine that she said I'm sure nobody here has ever heard of. I said, well, where was that? She said, well, I went to Bates College. And I said, my dad went there, which was kind of like an icebreaker because it kind of opened, the door to further conversation. And literally nobody else in my office knew where Bates College was. But I knew about it obviously from my dad. And, from there, it just opened a lot of conversations. And over the course of the next year of working together, I got to know her better, and really, I was really taken with her. I mean, she was the type of person who was she came, she was a very open, honest person. She had no airs about her. She was very smart. It happened to be that she had a lot of interests in things and loved to talk about the same things I did. Um, she had a sense of humor much like mine, and we appreciated each other's sense of humor that way. And as time went on, I found myself developing a very good friendship with her. And but then I started seeing that there was something more there. Going through the whole flirting process, and then it starts turning a little more serious. And I realized that, not to go too on about it, but she wasn't in a really serious relationship with anybody, and I had ended one,
Mhm.
some time before that. And I just figured, you know what, I don't want to let this woman out of my life. And one day I just came out and said, I said, I said, if you give me a chance, you won't regret it. And she said that was the most romantic thing I ever said to her. So, even all the years later. So, yeah, we made a serious relationship of it. She got into law school, as I knew she would have, in the Boston area. Um, she started law school full time. A couple of months before that, I switched jobs and went to a different company. So I was there for the entire law school adventure, which was, full time, very intense. She graduated in the top 5% of her class. She was a law review editor. She dedicated her law review article to me, just which I thought was a pretty cool thing to do. Um, but and from there, once it was really about a week after she graduated from law school, we moved out to Chicago. We knew that the economy in Boston at that time in the early 90s was not so great for either of us, but we figured, well, let's give Chicago a try. I liked the area. She was from here. She had family.
Yeah.
And it was in June of 1991 we moved out here. And, we had been married about a year. Um, Spent our first anniversary night at Niagara Falls in Canada because we were taking the drive out this way. I thought it was kind of cool. Um,
The
but
traditional Niagara Falls.
Traditional, right? Exactly. The place to be just happened to be along the route, so we figured, hey, why not? When in Rome.
Yeah.
Um, so we she eventually took the Illinois bar. Was working in the financial sector when she got her when she was a lawyer, got her license, the whole bit. I was working for a marketing communications company in the Chicago area. Um, our son Sam was born in '96, and she eventually went into the pharmaceutical world and was working in contracts management with. She ended up working for three different pharmaceutical companies in her lifetime. Um, Most of my time was with Astellas, and because of her background, she worked with a lot of negotiating clinical trial contracts. She was almost like an adjunct to the legal department. She kind of had let's say, full trust of the legal department because she had practiced law in Cook County in Illinois, which is the big time.
Right.
And
Very
I
high
remember,
population. I mean, that's where it all is in Cook
yes,
County, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a jungle to be practicing in that legal system. I remember her first couple of times that she came home crying. She was just like, I don't know
Oh,
if I'm going to withstand these people I'm dealing with,
yeah.
but they came to respect her because she always came prepared and she
Mhm.
never lost her cool, and she was very professional. And but she had the opportunity to get into the pharmaceutical world and not have to go to court anymore. and be paid better for it.
Right.
So that's how it's kind of like a little snapshot of our life together. And but throughout her life, Gail always had some problems with digestive issues, and yet she was a picture of health. I mean, she loved to run, great swimmer, loved to read, cook. She was an excellent cook. Um, Loved music, a lot of things, as I said, we had shared together. But she did have, going back to her childhood, some problems that were related to the GI system. Um, and it so happens one of her grandmothers did also.
Like
Uh,
IBD?
with Gail, it never got to the point where it's diagnosed at IBD, but it was, by the time she died, it was probably right on the precipice of it because she had, as you're familiar with, she had undiagnosed diverticulitis.
Right.
And this is what her grandmother had. And her grandmother had it and had surgery for it back in the 70s, which at that point, well, it was a bowel resection surgery and all, but let's face it, this from the 70s till today, a lot has moved forward.
Oh my
And
goodness,
her
yes.
grandmother lived another 25 years after that, even
After
though
her
she'd
surgery.
after her surgery.
Wow.
So there was some history with the different types of digestive problems. She always tried to shake it off because, you know, I guess the only way I can put it is that women are always conditioned to basically move forward, to push on, to be able to do. And I think that was ingrained in her. It was probably ingrained in her all the way from the time she was a kid, like with many women. And I think, unfortunately, it tends to lead you to overlook what might really be at work within you. Um, so that was kind of what brought us to that point where she was starting to experience a lot more episodes of the diverticulitis, where she couldn't get out of bed for the day. She was having problems. Sorry, I'm hearing some echo there. Where she may have been, she would have had to have come home from work early, or she couldn't eat, or things like this. The symptoms disappeared. She figured, well, it's probably a food allergy. It's probably the onset of menopause. It's probably there were different things over the years that I think she was trying to shake off. But I do remember one time that her mentioning to me, I don't ever want to go through what my grandmother went through. And I think back to that a lot. And I sometimes think, could that have affected her wanting to pursue the condition any further? I had always said, look, where medical technology is today, I mean, you can deal with it. It can be resolved. And I always let her know no matter what goes on, I'm there to help you get through it. I think she just, uh, I think she just maybe ignored the symptoms until it was too late to ignore them. Uh, so,
So she was having like bouts of stomach pain
yeah, yeah,
and, right, like
and
things that we now know were signs of diverticulitis.
exactly,
And you're
exactly.
absolutely right. I mean, Peter, women always try to brush off or explain, self-explain their symptoms. It's just kind of what we do. And you keep on going, and doctors dismiss them sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I think over the years, I don't think she always got the best. Whenever she would go for checkups, I don't think they really looked into it that deeply.
Right.
Um, I was always pushing to say, hey, look, let's go to a specialist. There are good specialists in the Chicago area. As it turns out, I'm right now, I think I may have mentioned to you in the past,
Mhm.
I also work with Northwestern University Medical Center and
Yeah,
their Digestive Health Institute, which I
great.
got involved with before I got involved with the Sepsis Alliance. So I've gotten to know their operation and I've gotten to know all of the great research that's going on there.
Mhm.
Um, Looking back on it, I wish Gail and I had known more about them early on because I'm convinced if she had gone to their care, we'd be having a whole different conversation about things. She'd still be here. you know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, hindsight is always 2020.
Oh, of course.
It just
Of course
seems
it is.
so clear, like, oh my God, why didn't we see this? Or, but in the moment, it's not really that clear. It's so murky, or, you know,
It is. It is. And when it happens, when it keeps reoccurring and then you come out of it without any real bad after effects, there's a tendency to say, well, maybe it is something else. Maybe it is a food allergy. Maybe it's just IBS and not developing into IBD. And as I've learned over the years, diverticulitis can develop into IBD. It can be related to other issues. Um, and
oh, and just so that our audience knows too, like diverticulitis is an infection in the colon
yes,
caused by diverticula disease. And I'll put a link in the description box. It's basically something they say that a lot of people over 50 develop diverticula in
hmm,
our intestines, and it's just like a part of aging or whatnot. But the intestines have these little pouches or pockets in them. So, and if one of those pouches or pockets becomes infected, that's what they call diverticulitis, and that's the infection. And that is what Gail wound up developing, right?
that's what she wound up developing when we brought her to the hospital. Which is a story in itself, but I'll get to that. When we did get her to the hospital and they performed the CAT scans, they found that she had two areas in her colon that had burst open. Now, to get her there was a bit of an effort because this was all happening. Her final episode uh, that proved fatal was happening at the time that COVID was beginning to rear its head.
Yeah.
It was February and March of 2020. At that point, nobody wanted to go near an emergency room. Nobody wanted to go near a hospital. Now, Gail was already, even though she worked in the I guess you can say the medical field because she worked in pharma,
Yeah.
and she knew enough about clinical studies and procedures and things because she had to negotiate the contracts. She developed a bit of a fear of doctors. I hate to say she did, but and I tried to help her get over it. Of course, she always said, well, you're a hypochondriac anyway, so you'll go running out the door if you've got a sniffle. Guilty. I am. I know that. Okay, I was the exact opposite of her on that end.
Yeah.
But you know, and she used to say to me at times, um, she would say to me, you're so overprotective and it drives me crazy. It just drives me nuts that you are that way. She said, but it's what I love the most about you. Don't ever stop doing it. And I just say to myself, God, I wish you would have let me be overprotective that time in March of 2020 because it was hard to get her there. But when I saw these symptoms getting worse and she was having labored breathing, I think back on it now, the symptoms that I didn't know then were the warning signs.
Right.
I said, we got to go. We've got to go. Uh, and
So it was more than just, the stomach pain. So her
yeah,
condition was progressing at home.
she was
Was
getting foggy brained. She was having trouble even holding a pen to write something, sleeping a
right.
lot. And by the time we got to the hospital, and I think she waited a couple of days too long because she didn't want to go on a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Because
begging
they're
her,
more crowded too on the
yeah,
weekend. Yeah.
she said, let's go Monday morning. Well, by the time we got there Monday morning, the rupture had occurred
Yeah.
and she was on borrowed time by that point. And she didn't even last 48 hours before she passed. And and for this all happening when COVID was taking hold, there was this aura around every hospital. And that was just ominous because everybody was just covered up to within an inch of their hairline.
All the
Everywhere they went, there were
yeah.
just, hand gel dispensers everywhere,
Yeah.
wearing, goggles, masks, and everything. And the hospital where we had taken her, within 2 weeks after she died, had been turned into basically a trauma center for just COVID patients. So it was you talk about timing. I mean, it couldn't have, this happening to her couldn't have been at a worse time. And I often wonder about it that, had had things been in place at a national level, where, this task force had not been um, brushed aside by the presidential administration, and that things were on the up and up, um, and we could have seen this coming, could
And
things have been
had,
different?
because that could have resulted in a national response too early on, would have
Yes,
resulted in more staffing for one,
exactly.
and the PPE gear that they needed right away. Like, COVID was not something you want to chase after. We needed to be ahead of it. And then
Exactly.
when you have conditions like other patients who were having heart attacks and stroke, and Gail there with diverticulitis, raging diverticulitis going on.
Mhm.
It was not only bad for COVID patients, but bad for other patients too. And this was right
It,
before lockdown occurred, right?
yeah, it was. I mean, lockdown, the day of her funeral, um, we had gone out for, dinner after the funeral, and that restaurant we went to was telling us, right after you folks leave, probably within 2 hours after you leave, we're going to be shutting down. We were one of the last parties that they had served until, for like another 4 or 5 months. And that was all happening. And it just, looking back on it, it was such a surreal, unbelievable time because with all this going on, I was trying to keep my head straight about, oh my God, she died. That type of reaction. What happened? She was just here 48 hours later, she's gone. And now we got this on top of it. Now we're all going to be locked in our houses. I can't go to the office. I can't go here. You have to line up, and they'll only allow so many people in a grocery store at a time, and all of this. So, yeah,
Your
the timing
world
of
was
everything.
turned upside down in so many ways. First,
Yes.
with the loss of Gail, and you go from having your wife one day to, as you said, less than 2 days later, she's gone.
Yeah. 1 minute you're
And
here, next minute you're gone, as the Bruce Springsteen song said. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And then lockdowns happen, and you're
Hmm.
trying to cope. I mean, there were a lot of people grieving during this time and had to do it alone, like sequestered and
Yes.
isolated. And how 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 did you cope?
Well, one of the ways that I had to cope was I realized that number one, this family doesn't need somebody else also, punching their ticket early, for the lack
Right.
of a better word. I realized I
I
had to
get
go
you.
on, and I couldn't let it get to me to the point where my health was in jeopardy. My son was devastated. He was 24 at the time. You're just starting
Oh
to
my
relate to your
God.
parents as an
Yeah.
adult yourself.
Yeah.
And he was totally devastated. Um, her mom and dad were like looking at this saying, oh my God, we're burying our daughter before we're gone.
Before them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, my sister-in-law, my nieces, everybody, we were just in shock, as were my friends. Nobody could fathom what was going on, because they had seen this very healthy, very outgoing, happy person that Gail was, and she was the type of person who made friends very easily because of her personality. And next minute, she's gone. And as everybody said, I can't believe she's not here anymore. I was like, well, yeah. Um, and what happened at that point is I just realized that we've got this other thing layered on top of it. I've got to somehow try to not only hold myself together, but hold everybody else I know together to get through this, because there's no other way out. I mean, this has happened. And you know, and I went through the panic attacks. I went through the absolute grief of it all where I could barely get out of bed in the morning, but I had to. And I realized that Gail wouldn't want me to give in and just fade away because of this. And I just knew that inside that she wants me to get through this and come out somehow, in some way, better on the other side, which was what eventually got me into advocacy in different organizations because I just felt that that was how I was going to make things better.
Peter, had you or Gail heard of sepsis before this happened? Did
Yeah,
you? You
we
did?
had heard about it. The problem was we didn't know what the warning signs were. And, you know, like many people, it's a very good question because so many people that you talk to, they always refer to sepsis as blood poisoning. And
Yes.
they think that that's what it's all about, as if, you know, you can't contract sepsis unless maybe you have a cut or something like that. And what we knew was what sepsis was, but we didn't know just how easy it could develop from so many different sources. Like someone can get it from the flu. Someone who's immunocompromised is much more susceptible. And Gail did have some autoimmune issues that went back to her childhood
Yeah, we had
that she
talked
dealt with.
about that. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Like, what did she have?
Well, one thing she always dealt with eczema,
Okay.
and sometimes I wonder if the the weakening of the intestinal walls was brought on because at one point she was taking medication for the eczema when it got really bad, whether it
Yeah.
was topical or oral, that was steroid based. And everybody
Right.
knows that, too much of that will weaken. So I
Oh,
sometimes
yes.
wonder of that. But
Right.
those were some of the issues that she had besides the digestive issues. But over time she managed to deal with them until the point where, well, if you don't diagnose it properly, and you don't catch it properly to get the diagnosis, it can progress into other areas. And
And
that's definitely what happened.
they can diagnose diverticular disease
Oh,
by
yes.
CAT scans and colonoscopies, and they can also diagnose if you are in an active infection like diverticulitis. One of the nurses told me when I was getting treated for my post-op infection that she said, "Oh, you had diverticulitis too." This was a real young nurse. And she said,
Hmm.
"Yeah, I had diverticulitis but they caught it early." And she had to spend a few days in the hospital on IV antibiotics.
Yeah.
So diverticulitis, our audience should know it is something that can be caught. I mean, they saw that my colon was thickened back in April when I was in the hospital, and I was waiting for an appointment to follow up with a gastroenterologist when my colon perforated in May. So, and the gastro wasn't going to see me until June again because COVID was so crazy then in
Hmm.
2021, as you were saying, like, and doctors' offices were fully booked and it was hard to get in to see someone. So, but yes, our audience should know that diverticular disease and diverticulitis can be diagnosed by gastroenterologists or emergency room doctors who happen to pick it up on a CAT scan.
Well, it's interesting. You just reminded me of something. When Gail was not feeling well, going back to, like late February, early March, she was trying to get in touch with a gastroenterologist who had been referred to her, but they were booking appointments out to May.
Yeah.
And Gail was like, I can't get in to see anybody else. And she said, maybe I should wait. I said, Gail, we can't wait. She said, well, I don't want to go to an emergency room right now. And
Right. And get
there you
COVID.
go. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, yeah, that's all part of the picture.
Yeah.
It's all part of the whole picture. But as to what we knew what sepsis was. We didn't realize how many different ways it could develop. We didn't know the warning signs. All I knew is that before I took her into the hospital, something wasn't right because of the labored breathing, the fogginess, and besides just the symptoms that she would get in her intestines. And it
And
was, of
she was
course,
only 58, right?
she was 54.
54. That's
Yeah,
right. Oh my God.
54
Yes.
years, 2 months, and
Way too
27
young.
days. Yeah, way too young.
Yeah.
When you consider her one of her grandmothers, not the one who had the surgery, that one died when she was 90. Her other grandmother lived to 107.
Holy moly. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so to have her die at 54 is a cruel joke, to say the least.
Right.
Um, but yeah, we were aware. I guess you can say we weren't aware enough, like many people were. But once we got to the hospital and they did the CAT scans and they ran the tests on her, uh, that's when they told me, they said she's going into septic shock. And of course, at that point, I was trying to get hold of every doctor in that hospital. I must have gotten 4 different opinions. And I said, you've got to be able to do something for her. And the consensus just kept coming back saying, if we do surgery, she's either going to die on the table or she will survive hooked up to feeding tubes and what have you. And within a week, she'll probably be gone. They said she has probably a 15% chance of survival at this point because of the way it was spreading. It was already
Yes.
spreading into her liver, her kidneys, her lungs. And that's when I woke up to the fact of, boy, this doesn't mess around. This is not something to take a chance with. And when I look back on it today, it still drives me to the point where we've got to really make the public aware of just what this is and what it does,
And how
because
fast it
and how
is.
fast it is, just like the time, the thing that we talk a lot about in the
Right.
Alliance.
Yeah.
Um, that is so, so critical. And, for better or for worse, people know that I'm involved in these organizations, and they do come to me for information, which I'm glad they do, because if somebody suspects that uh, there may be something wrong with them that could be leading to that, they're at least seeking out some information that they may not have had. Of course, I always say to people, get yourself get admitted now, check it out, don't wait, don't take a chance.
And
Yeah.
I think this is a prime example. Gail was successful professionally. She had a
Hmm.
wonderful family. She was active. She was healthy.
Yep.
She had her health issues. I mean, a lot of people do.
Sure.
And it sepsis affects and can affect anyone,
Yes.
anyone. And one of the things that I want people to start realizing is, even if you've never had sepsis before or haven't had a family member affected by sepsis, you still need to learn about it, because it's just like people, everybody learns about heart attack. And I
Exactly.
haven't had a heart attack. I haven't had anyone in my immediate family have a heart attack, but we all know what heart attack is. And we all know what the signs and symptoms are.
Hmm.
And we all know what some of the signs and symptoms are of breast cancer, colorectal
Yes.
cancer, even if we've never been affected. And I would like to personally see sepsis become, the awareness around sepsis to reach that level. Even if you've never been affected, you should still know what sepsis is. And I'm sorry, audience, if I'm getting a little preachy here, but
No, preach,
there's,
because you know what? That's exactly what I believe in myself. That's
yeah,
exactly what I've been
we're,
doing.
we're losing too many
Yes.
people, like your
Yes.
beautiful wife. And this didn't have to happen.
No.
These deaths are preventable. Most of sepsis deaths are preventable, just like Gail's.
I one of the people who I on the advisory board with at Northwestern, her name is Julia. She lives in Colorado. She's one of the people who helped me get involved with advocacy like this when I was when I first joined the Northwestern advisory board. She, she's in her like early to mid 40s, but when she was a teenager, she nearly died from one of the things was septic shock. Um, she had had up to that point undiagnosed Crohn's and colitis. When it got to such a bad point, and she was admitted to the hospital. She said it was so bad that her family was about ready to call a priest and give her last rites. Um, she survived it, but in the course of her illness, she suffered sepsis, and she did mention that for a few years after that, she said, "I'm in my early 20s and I'm dealing with brain fog and all this." Now, to look at her today, she's the picture of health. She's a remarkable person, very big part of the Digestive Health Institute organization, but she helped inspire me to get involved because the level of passion that she has for digestive health, I said, that's what we need. And that's what when I got involved with the Sepsis Alliance, to try and bring that to myself, to get that level of involvement and passion for raising awareness for this. And one thing I always like to tell people is that I'd like to see sepsis get to the point where the Susan G. Komen Foundation got breast cancer awareness too. Now,
Yes,
the Susan G.
me
Komen
too.
Foundation may not be the organization that everybody thinks, they've had their controversies, okay?
Right. Right.
However, one thing that they have done right that you cannot take away from them is that they took the discussion of breast cancer out of the back room and they put it
Yes.
front and center. So it has become talked about. The research that has gone into it, the earlier diagnoses. That's what I want to see, just as you mentioned, Jackie, what I want to see happen for sepsis, that same level. And that's where we all come in. We're the foot soldiers to be out there to bring
Right.
that because of our experiences. And
Mhm.
man, talk of experiences, when I hear stories like yours and I hear stories from other people who have survived, and what they've gone through, um, it's harrowing. It just makes, for me, it just makes me all the more passionate to want to get us to the point where we can eradicate this public health menace, because it's not an easy road for those who survive. And I realize that, that could have been Gail. She could have survived and have had a rough road ahead had she survived. And I was prepared for it, to do whatever it took to get her back to health. But it's not an easy road. And yet so many people aren't aware that this goes on. And it's criminal, in my
And it,
opinion.
right. And it's random. I tell people how,
Yes.
like, random, because I, I, I wondered afterwards, I was like, how in the world did I survive this? Because the doctors were telling us how bad sepsis is, and, and how dire it was. And I'm going, well, wow, and that's just it about sepsis. You don't have any time to mess around, because the cascade of the things that take place within your body, by the time it starts to get to your organs, as it did with Gail's and started shutting them down,
Hmm.
um, that's what sepsis does, is, it causes death by shutting down all of your organs, and you can't survive that. And but it's random in that, this is why we need that fast response in all hospitals. This is why we need the sepsis education and the awareness, because there's just no time. And you can do your very, very best. I mean, I know, as you described what Gail's thinking process was, that she attributed it to this, or it could be allergies. That was so logical. And so many people do the same thing. It's like, oh, I thought it was this, or I talked to a woman, survivor, who said she was developing fevers or chills, and she attributed it to the time of what the year it was, and that it was very cold outside.
Hmm.
And that's why she was having chills. We that's all due to this lack of understanding how sepsis develops and what those red flags are. And
Exactly.
Sepsis Alliance, I mean, I was so glad to find them, because, an audience, if you go to www.sepsis.org, you can find mountains of educational materials on there, starting with that very basic question: what is sepsis?
Oh, this organization has been, it has helped me with my, I guess, moving forward in life.
Right.
because of what I've learned about sepsis. And when I see what this organization is doing to not just raise awareness, but to try to help bring awareness to the research or fund the research or various initiatives, including legislative, um, it's a dynamic organization. And I point people to this organization's website quite often because this is your information portal. You want to know what sepsis is. You want to know what it is that took my wife's life. Go here and you can find out as well as see her story, and the story of other people who either were victims or survived. And I think it's a great thing that they are doing. Um, and as the thing that I'm trying to do going forward is I've tried the route of working with local hospitals to bring about some sort of I guess you can say talks, seminars, like you've done with
Right.
like a lot of the senior
The
centers.
my sepsis talks, yes,
Right.
yes.
I've tried to get the same thing started at like the local school levels or with some local hospitals. Now, since I'm affiliated with Northwestern Medicine, they have a good program that someone like Northwestern is going to have that. They're one of the biggest in the country,
Right.
and they do a pretty good job with that. So there's
Hmm.
no room for me to make anything different without stepping on someone else's toes there. And since I'm involved in another area there, I don't want to um,
Yes,
overstay my welcome somewhere.
exactly.
So, but it's the smaller hospitals that are, in the communities that found had a harder time getting through to them to try and do something. And I don't know if it's that in one instance, they told me we really don't have it in our staffing right now to dedicate the time towards it or what have you. I've even gone to schools, and I did have some in the local high school district, one person who took an interest in doing something like this when they were going to put on a community health symposium, but they couldn't
Yes,
get it off the ground. The entire
right,
symposium, they just couldn't get it off the ground, but there was interest.
right.
Um, my local congressman, who was a very good congressman, and I have no issue with him, but the people in his office,
Not
I was so
getting on.
disappointed when I went to them. I think I relayed the story to you when they
Yeah,
just said to me, rare diseases. And I'm like, rare diseases? Do you realize how many people this kills every year? It's
yeah.
killing more people than lung
Three,
cancer. I mean,
yeah.
you know,
350,000 adults every year in
yeah,
America and 6,800 kids every.
exactly. And when you think of how this gets tied to maternal health
Right.
and to uh, you know uh, the health of juveniles and
Mhm.
younger people,
Babies and
yes,
I mean everyone. People
it's
with
it's just
chronic
everywhere.
conditions, people with cystic fibrosis, cancer patients
Yes,
who are using chemotherapy to treat their cancer have their immune systems decrease, the response of their immune system is lowered, and that opens them up to infections where they can develop sepsis.
yes.
Everybody, Peter, literally everybody.
So
And
the
that's,
ad.
yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, I was done. I just had a little
Okay.
bandwidth brain thing
Yeah,
there.
I just these things are popping into my head as I recall them because as I'm trying to advocate and find different avenues. Um, again, working with legislators, to me, this is the next thing I want to really put my time toward because when I saw that you had people like the Stauntons and what they did with then sepsis. A woman in Rhode Island who I had spoken to in the past, her last name was Sorella, Tara Sorella, I believe. She had gotten the same type of legislation done in Rhode Island. They were getting something on the books in New York.
And here in
And
Maryland
and
with
in
law,
Maryland, yes, with Governor Westmore, who's a
yes,
fantastic guy, by the way.
yeah,
Gail
we love
saw
him.
him. Gail saw him speak years ago at a medical industry event before he became governor when she was at Estellas. And she was so impressed by his talk, she bought his book, The Other Westmore. And I
Yeah,
remember she gave it to me for Christmas. She said, "You got to read about this guy. It's just a
great guy.
fantastic guy."
He truly
But
is.
at this level, it's happening at some levels, but not enough. And when I found out that Representative Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey was sponsoring national legislation,
Yeah,
and it had been didn't get anywhere the first time, but then it got reintroduced, I believe, by some other people because I know she's
Yes.
running for governor in New Jersey right now.
Well,
Um, this to me is where I want to try and get my foot in the door and do something about because if we can get something done on a national level for establishing protocols, and at the same time you're raising awareness to people as to why these protocols have to be in place, my opinion, I think that can go a long way to getting us to where we want to be, where this is no longer just some mysterious ailment that's out in the shadows of society.
right. And that we can stop these preventable deaths from occurring in everybody from babies to older people,
Mm-hmm.
people around Gail's age. I mean, it shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened to her, and it shouldn't have happened to many of these 350,000 people every year. I mean, it's crazy. And we do have to, I mean, following the advancements and the awareness efforts that, breast cancer has made, and I'm going to air this episode during Sepsis Awareness Month, which is September, and I would like it to be known for everyone in America that September is Sepsis Awareness Month, because we all know when October rolls around, that's breast cancer month,
Right.
and we know when February rolls around, it's heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
So we know these things, and we need to bring sepsis up to that level. Sepsis Alliance is our wonderful platform that's helping us also to amplify our voices, or helping us, like I'm going to be in Washington in September talking to legislators with them. And, it feels exhausting, but we can't quit. We have to keep
No,
doing it over and over and over again, because the breast cancer advocates didn't quit. Cystic
that's right.
fibrosis advocates didn't quit. And because of what the cystic fibrosis community has done with their awareness, they have new research that came out with new medications like Trikafta to treat their lungs and their lung issues. So I know we can do this with sepsis. I know we can.
Oh, I know we can also, and I think it depends on just finding a sweet spot that you're comfortable with to do it. I mean, my message to people is get involved at a level you're most comfortable with,
Yes.
and take it from there. I mean, I happened 2 years ago, I managed to get the local NBC affiliate to do a story on Sepsis Awareness Month, and I wasn't aiming for this, but they did an interview with me, um, which was kind of
Linked.
intimidating
Is that on
at
Sepsis
first.
Alliance's website?
I'm not sure if it is. It was at one point. I
Okay,
still have the link to it. I'll be glad to send it to you.
send me the link. I'll put the link for the audience member. So I'm going to put it in the description box below
I mean,
this.
it was when they wanted to do the interview with me, I was like, gee, you sure you really need me to, I was kind of camera shy at the point. But
You get
the,
better and better at it, though. We get
yeah,
the more you do it, the more
yeah.
you get better at it.
And the person who interviewed me, oddly enough, she now works, the reporter for NBC5, she now works for Northwestern.
Oh,
She's
get out.
working, she's now working as a media liaison for Northwestern Medicine,
Oh my
which is
gosh.
was really kind of wild. But she was very good, and she really did a great job working with me and with also Dr. Corinne Mollander contributed to
Yeah.
the piece,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
and it was a great piece. And people came up to me for weeks afterwards saying, "I never knew about this, and I knew that what happened to Gail, but I didn't know that this is what it
Mhm.
all was," and that alone made an impact. And so it took a while to pull it together, but the
Mhm.
people at the Sepsis Alliance and NBC5 and myself, we made it work. And like you say, it's just like putting your heart and soul into it and getting involved for the greater good. You can make it happen, and then who knows what happens from there? Because this is what opens doors. This is what opens doors to other people to see that this is what needs to be done. So we get to the level of what Mikey Sherrill did to get legislation moving through Congress that will establish at every hospital in this country what they should be doing when people are admitted and they suspect sepsis.
Yes.
And I mean, there's enough stories out there of people who could have been saved or people who were saved but are experiencing life-altering episodes that it could have been prevented. So
Absolutely. And our audience should know, as Peter was saying, it's so easy to get started. You just make that tiny little scratch in the surface, in the tip of
mhm,
the iceberg. Contact your local news stations, contact your local paper, put a
exactly.
letter to the editors. I
This is
mean,
what I did. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, those are easy to, just get that little bit of information out there. And people might not hear it right away, but eventually they hear us.
Yes.
And that gives us the power to change the world, to change, because sepsis isn't just a US issue, it's a global issue.
No.
49 million deaths, number one killer of children around the world
That's
is
if
sepsis.
more people were aware of that, just how one of the things that stood out to me is that on occasion I'd hear people saying to me, "Well, sepsis doesn't that tend to affect people who's just are like older people who have compromised immune systems?"
Yeah.
And I mentioned to them, and I said, if you look at every state where there has been some sort of legislation put through to establish protocols for treating people,
Mhm.
every one of those initiatives has been named for someone under the age of 18 years old.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is? I mean, this is doesn't
Rory's
discriminate.
regulations in New
Yeah,
York, 12-year-old
yeah.
Rory,
The girl
5-year-old,
in Rhode Island was like a 15-year-old. I think she was 14 or 15 who died from it.
right,
Yeah.
and 5-year-old Lulu Haynes.
Yes.
Lulu's Law. I mean, all
Yep.
of these pieces of legislation and everything that we are trying to get passed, or as you so eloquently put it, yes, look at the ages of the people for which this legislation is being named. And
Hmm.
these were otherwise healthy children.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, I
And
mean,
see, you hope that that should motivate people right there,
right.
to
Dr.
see.
Flatley founded Sepsis Alliance because of losing his 22-year-old daughter,
Yes.
healthy girl, healthy young girl, and lost her to a post-op infection that developed into sepsis. So
His
sepsis
story,
doesn't discriminate people.
no. And it's his story that got me involved in this organization. I remember reading
Right.
about his story online. And
Aaron,
what
yeah.
that's how it led me into Sepsis Alliance. And I said, this is a group I want to be part of. I mean, to see how this man, how he's dedicated his life after losing his daughter in such a tragic fashion. I can relate and I can see, he's going strong with this. It's still his life's work. And to me, it's like, what better way to honor someone you loved and for their life to have a certain eternal flame burning than to do something like this.
You're carrying Gail's light
Yes,
forward.
that's how I see it. Exactly, Jackie. That's exactly how I see it. Yep.
Do you have, before we go, Peter, do you have any advice for, as we know, there have been a lot of people lost to sepsis, and someone who's listening to this who's lost somebody to sepsis, or, lost a beloved family member for, due to any cause? What helps with grieving? What helps with coping?
Oh, glad you asked that. Counseling, get help. Mental health is of the utmost importance when you're dealing with this situation. I knew I was going to have to get some sort of counseling when Gail died, and I stayed with it for 4 years. I stayed with it for 4 years where I was at one point I was going once a week. Then I eventually cut back to once every 2 weeks, and then towards the end it was once a month. And I got to the point where I knew, and my counselor said, "You're in good standing. Don't be afraid to check back in," which I do on occasion. About a month ago, I had to check back in just to see that I was still hitting on all cylinders. But counseling, you got to talk. You got to find the right person, the right counselor, and don't just settle for anybody if you don't think it's the right counselor. Because I tried one person and I said, this guy doesn't get it. And then I
And you
found
kind
a
of
woman,
know right away.
right away, yeah, whether they're
Yeah,
going to be able to help you.
right.
And then I found another counselor, and she's been wonderful. And I couldn't recommend it any more than I am. I'm emphatic. You have to get counseling, talk to people. Um, for some people, maybe getting involved in support groups Now, I didn't really do that. Um, I was getting a lot out of the individual counseling, but I never shied away from support groups. And to this day, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to being part of a support group. But if that's the route you want to go, get involved that way. But um, I'd say first and foremost, get help. Talk with your friends, talk with your family, because what you're going to find out is that some people aren't going to want to talk about this, and this goes right through families as well, that they won't want to talk. But the only way everybody heals is by talking it through. And I really can't say enough about what it did for me. And and then, growing out of that, you find your way into, as we have, being parts of organizations that are bigger than us, that are carrying a message forward on behalf of everybody. So the first step is the most important one. And then from there, be part of something bigger than yourself. And
Yes.
that I find is a way that helps you heal. And then always talk about the person. Don't ever stop talking, reminiscing, um, anything that keeps the person alive. I mean, there's special things I do on Gail's birthday. I still do something special even on our anniversary. I try to, whether it's cooking a meal that we both liked or something like that. Um, and every year on her birthday, I make a point of making a donation to two charities we liked to give to, and one was a local food bank, and the other one was an animal shelter. And every year I make right around Christmas, because Gail was born in December. So I always make contributions every year to them. So it's things like that. It's things like that that keep the spirit of that person alive, and keeps you human.
Yes. And grief doesn't, it's not something where you go, okay, I dealt with it for a year now. I'm good.
When people, when
I
I
mean,
hear people talk like that, that really annoys the hell out of me, because it's like, no,
right.
grief is always part of your life. It's like someone said, it's like a stone you carry around in your pocket. You're moving forward, but it's always there. But you
Mhm.
learn how to live with it. And that's one of the things that I got out of therapy, is that you learn how to live your life and move forward, which I emphasize. It's not moving on, it's moving forward. And you move forward in your life, but you always have that grief. Something that my late Aunt Grace said, when my Uncle Ed, he was 46 years old, he died of a heart attack. My Aunt Grace lived to 101. But one of the things, like she said, you never get over it. You learn how to keep learning, leading your life. And she raised three daughters and everything. But like she said, I never forgot my husband. I never got over what happened. But she said, I had to live, and I had to live in his memory as well. So things like that, you just have to know how to keep on keeping on.
Right. Exactly that, Peter. And wonderful, beautiful words and sentiments for those listening in who have lost someone. And seeking counseling and seeking help is often, very, very helpful in helping nudge us sort of out of that spot. You don't want to get
Mhm.
stuck.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
just don't, because that's a trip you don't want to take. I can recall when, for that first month after Gail died, there were times where I just, not that I was suicidal or anything, but I just felt horrible. And I didn't like the feeling. I felt I was spinning in this, like this whirlwind, and I didn't know how to stop it. And I just figured, I can't do this. And I just kept telling myself, is this what Gail wants to see? When she's looking down from above, is this what she wants to see from her husband? No, it's not what she wants to see. And nobody else wants to see it either. I've got to I've got to live, and I've got to live in her memory as well. So,
Peter, thank you. And thank you for sharing about Gail with us and inviting us in to tell us about her and who Gail was and why you're doing what you're doing. And I know that's really, really, really difficult. And I really appreciate, and our audience, I'm sure, very much appreciates learning more about Gail. and who she
Well,
was.
thank you. As I said, her story is on the Sepsis Alliance website, the tribute page.
Yes, and we'll put a link
But
to that as well. We're going to have several links in the discussion or the description box below. So,
okay, well, that's great. Well, I'm glad you invited me on here today and you allowed me to relay a little bit of Gail's story and what advice I can give to people to help get through this type of loss and make a
yeah.
meaningful life in the in the aftermath.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you, audience, for being here with us today and listening in. And I'll be seeing you again soon. Sepsis Awareness Month is upon us. So
Yes, it is. And thanks for doing these podcasts, Jackie. These are fantastic. I've watched all of them.
oh,
You're doing good
thank
work here.
you. Thank you so much, Peter. All right, everyone. Till next time.